Welcome back to the UnHerd Club, everybody, and happy Valentine's Eve, a new festivity that I've created for the purposes of tonight. Contrary to popular opinion, I'm not a cynic. I am actually a romantic. I love love, and I fear that there is a war happening on romance, in fact, raging on romance. Dark forces are at the gates of both polyamory and prudishness on either side. Wherever you look, there is an assault on the romantic. There is a hostility to the kind of thing that you might have read about in years past in Burns or Byron or Shelley. They're even coming for cousin marriage now, which I'm not sure we can afford to lose at this point, given that so few people are getting married as it stands. The number of unmarried 25 to 35-year-olds has more than doubled in the last 30 years. Birth rates, as you probably know, are plummeting by 3% a year, which got worse during COVID, not better, even though everyone's locked up and there was literally nothing else to do than make babies. In 2000, 34.8% of films were listed on IMDb, one of my favourite websites, as romance. But that figure has since plummeted to 8%. In a final bid to do justice to Saint Valentine and save romance once and for all, we've brought together three of UnHerd's favourite writers, who are all in their own way, I suppose, chipping at the cynical coalface of modern love lives in their various ways. They are Sheehan Quirke, aka the Cultural Tutor, author of an extremely popular Twitter account that you should all follow. Poppy Sowerby, who is our star sex columnist. She refuses that name,
like that.
But it does seem to be a topic that she writes with aplomb on, and I'm sure we'll get round to tonight. And in the middle, Freya India, author of the wonderful Girls Substack that many of you may well be subscribed to, and I'd heartily recommend. So please welcome them all for this Valentine's Day special to the UnHerd Club.
Did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you feel the benefits in every aspect of your life? I found an incredible tool that helps me understand and optimize my metabolism, Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It measures your metabolism through your breath, and with the app, shows whether you're burning fat or carbs. Plus, it gives you personalized guidance on nutrition, workouts, sleep, and stress management. Just breathe into Lumen first thing in the morning and you'll get real-time insights into your metabolism. It then provides a daily nutrition plan tailored just for you. You can also use it before and after meals and workouts to track your progress and adjust as needed. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It turns food into fuel. A healthy metabolism means better energy levels, improved fitness, easier weight management, and even better sleep. Lumen helps you make smarter choices to keep your metabolism in top shape. Take the next step towards better health. Go to lumen.me/unheard to get 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/unheard for 20% off. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask the obvious question, is romance dead? Because it's far too simple. There are far more complicated things at play here. Classical romance and modern romance look like very, very different things. But I wanted to chart across this evening a kind of set of challenges to romance in the modern day. And then perhaps towards the end we can get on to some cures or remedies or ways of returning to the kind of romance that I mentioned there in the introduction that Burns or Byron might have written about. So let's start with the obvious, which is the introduction of dating apps and this kind of sudden choice anxiety that everyone has in the contemporary moment, or at least any young person who is inundated with information and options. Freya, you had a conversation with Mary Harrington quite recently for your Substack in which you spoke about this idea of the absolute kind of flush of information and imagery that means that young people suddenly feel that instead of finding someone in their local village, a nice girl or a nice boy who they might want to settle down with and have children and milk a cow with, they have got every option under the sun. So tell me a bit about that. Why has that kind of paralysed young people, and what has it done to the minds of people when they first think about getting into their early relationships?
Yeah, I think we really underestimate how much it shapes your view, not just of romance and relationships, but like of other people, just viewing them as like products that you swipe through and like shop for. And I think for our generation, it's like we view attracting a mate as turning yourself into a better product. So you have to kind of advertise yourself like an object. You have to be really good at marketing. And I think that really warps your view of just like other humans and how to interact with them. And your empathy for other people as well. You go into a dating market where you have to, sell yourself, and then you judge other people on these metrics as well. And I think it's really tragic, and the fact that like the most romantic thing that can happen in our generation is like a super like on Tinder is just so depressing. And yeah, I think that worldview of other people are things that I shop for and can dispose of. Is really prevalent, and it's actually really hard to undo when that's all you've known while you're growing up and your brain's still forming, and it's like your first experience of falling in love and relationships.
I've never had a dating app, so I'm probably not best placed to talk about it. I mean, I've had the good fortune to meet my girlfriend in a sort of romantic way. We just ran into each other 4 days consecutively by pure chance, and that's how things started. But what I realised was, I have some friends, boys all my age who I lived with at university, and they're on dating apps all the time. And what I realised was that the only time they ever thought that viewing someone romantically was sort of, if you like, condensed down to the experience of using the app. So day to day in their lives, there was no possibility of seeing someone in that way. It's sort of streamlining the whole experience of love and romance and passion into a part of their daily schedule when they get home from work, half an hour, swipe half an hour, see what happens, hopefully find a date, and that was it. And then one of them, I remember, this is a couple of years ago, I was over at the house and he came home and he's like, boys, you've got it. And he'd met a girl at a cafe. And they got talking and they'd agreed to go out for a date, and the fact that it happened in person, he was absolutely ecstatic, and they were all, blown away by this fact. From my experience from the outside, seeing them, they seem to have condensed romance, which before I'd like to think, or maybe it never was, I don't know, but at least I would like to believe it could be something which is sort of all-consuming, and it's always there, the possibility is always there. I mean, some of you tonight may afterwards meet somebody when you're socialising.
It's the singles night as
exactly.
Well.
That's been removed, right? It's been turned into, I'd say, a part of the routine, which is quite, sad.
Well, also it sounds like the second part of that is that it's almost become part of work. Mm-hmm. That you could seamlessly transition from, say, going along a slideshow on PowerPoint and typing messages on Slack to getting home and going through images of potential partners and sending them super likes. Poppy, you obviously are young.
Young.
It is one of your great strengths.
One of my assets, guys.
One of your many assets.
Yeah.
You must know people who are, like Sheehan, constantly dealing with these apps. How is it different for women? Because I think there perhaps we get a slightly perhaps romanticised view, that there is hope there, or expectation of something. I think for many women it's a slightly nihilistic experience.
Yeah, well, the saying goes that men are pearl diving on dating apps, and for women it's dumpster diving. Okay. But do you know what? I think first of all it's important to unpack this thing about, because have you guys actually been on dating apps?
I've never had one.
What about you?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So you know,
Well,
it's like maybe.
I feel like for young women, but like at uni, it's like they use it as like entertainment.
Yeah,
it's like another app.
It's not this obsessive thing. I think there's a good point to be made about a bespoke mentality. Everyone imagines a dream partner that doesn't really exist. These algorithms are meant to keep us on the app, or is designed to keep us unsatisfied. But dating apps, that idealism melts away as soon as you're sat opposite someone in a pub. In reality, there's this stat that I really believe, which is that within a fraction of a second you can tell if you want to sleep with someone. I think that those things, dating apps, building your profile, is a way of inveigling your way into a situation in which someone can or cannot make that decision. And I think that actually the dystopian nature of all that stuff, I'm going to say it's overblown. I think actually dating apps are just to get you in the room, and most dates, I think the thing about being a woman here, this is where it comes in, I think women are probably better socialised to just sort of be normal and talk on a date. And if a man, the strange thing about dating apps is that they'll get a man to a date, which he probably wouldn't have secured in a real life what people call cold approach. You know, where you go up to a woman.
A cold approach?
A cold approach is something that...
Where can I find one of these cold approaches?
really frosty approach in my case. No, so it's this thing that hookup artists, it's like, you know, years old.
Oh,
it's what you call going up and talking to a woman.
It's the you know, The Game, that book? So the kind of concept...
So you mean, I mean, I've heard about these...
Yeah,
these
so cold approach
people.
is just where you literally go up to a normal woman and ask for a number.
So, but that doesn't mean just like a conversation. Like,
yeah, but that would filter yourself out. If you're a total freak, you're not going to get past the cold approach.
I see.
So you're actually saying that maybe it hasn't thwarted romance in quite the way that kind of hysterical people might suggest
not
it
at all.
has.
I think it's just created a few more strange experiences where people who are quite different end up going to a pub together, and I don't think that's all too bad, you know. Even if you have weird and, you know, sometimes slightly concerning experiences on these apps, it's all a good story, isn't it? Who cares?
Let's move towards the kind of wider theme there, which is like the optimization of relationships. This is the kind of, I guess, more meta thing that we're talking about, which is the idea that there always could be a better option, and that your duty as a romantic unit is to maximize for the best options possible. Where does that come from? Where is that? Is that a kind of downstream of a highly capitalist society? What is it that makes us want to optimize for our romantic relationships rather than having a kind of inconvenient love affair, which is what most marriage and poetry is made up of?
Well, I think like there's so many industries and apps in the modern world that are promising like convenience and making things easier and faster. So like Spotify, it's great that it will find albums faster for you. It's great that Amazon will deliver things quicker for you. But I don't think it's so great that Tinder will like speed up the dating process and be as fast and efficient and convenient as possible. So I think that's the problem, is that we have all of these industries that are convenient, but we're trying to make like the most spontaneous and beautiful thing in the world, which is to meet someone and fall in love, more convenient and faster, which is, I don't think that's how it works.
We were talking earlier, and I think this is fascinating, about the way in which this has also impacted the parents of people who are having their first romantic relationships. The idea that, in fact, instead of being parents who say, look, you're now 30, you're really getting on, you really need to hurry up, parents are, at least colloquially, putting pressure on their children to remain single, or at least to keep their options open. Can you just explain kind of why you think that's happening in this moment?
Yeah, I think it's a fear now that, you know, someone will make a commitment and it's too final, and they feel like the best route to happiness would be to keep your options open for as long as possible. So you experience as many people as possible, and you're probably less likely to end up, you know, I think a lot of older generations went through divorce and there was a lot of family breakdown, and people were kind of scarred by that, and they don't want their children to go through the same thing. So I think a lot of it is well-intentioned, but it's like a fear that your child will make the wrong decision, and that's kind of being passed down now to younger generations.
I think the convenience point is really vital, right? Because right now we live in the age of self-help, of self-optimization. The best-selling books are all about sleeping habits and healthy eating and breathing patterns, I guess, and journaling and note-taking and scheduling and side gigs and side hustles. We're treating sort of the human, we're treating life, let's just say, as if it's this sort of algorithm that can be, if you just tweak it, then your life is going to be perfect, right?
You can hack it.
You can hack it, exactly. But so we're trying to optimize life, and also, as you said, it's all about convenience. We want everything to be easier and quicker. You know, the modern world is basically defined by convenience. Look at Just Eat or Uber Eats as like the supreme example of that. And the thing with romance, not just dating, but you know, it does say in the title of this event, is romance dead? Romance is I'd like to think, anything but convenient. Romance is by definition inconvenient, right? That's the whole point of it. And in this culture of convenience and of self-optimization, where we're trying to schedule it. I said this to my friend a few weeks ago. We were talking on the phone, and he was like, Sheehan, I'm trying to meet a nice Christian girl, and he's been going to Bible study. He clearly wanted to get involved in a romance. He wanted to be involved in sort of a whirlwind passion. He'd probably been reading too many old books or poems or whatever. But his life was so, he'd got it down to every hour, he had a calendar, and every hour of every week he's got things booked in, and maybe I'm wrong, but what I said to him was, you can't schedule romance, right? And I think we have this hyper optimization mindset doesn't lend itself to those. When we say romance, we think of impulse and these spontaneous decisions that they go against all rational justification, and people say no, don't do that, but you do it anyway. That's what we mean by the word romance, right? For good or for bad, right? Maybe romance isn't a good thing. We could talk about that,
Well, I always think about the romantic scenes in films. Is someone running, usually a man, through an airport.
Always running,
and,
yes.
And the airport TSA will kind of part, like the sea, for this act of romance. And then, of course, if you've ever been to an airport, at least recently, it's not conducive to that kind of romance. And in a way, that is a metaphor for the death of romance being caused by efficiency and caused by safetyism.
By safety, safetyism is true. It's true. I think we're probably more. This is going to sound a little bit dramatic, but I think we're more sort of scared of death, I think, than any previous generation in human history. Where we seem to think now the purpose of life is just to live as long as possible, which of course defeats the point of living in the end. The example being sort of the safest building in the world, the one freest from sort of fire risk, is one that doesn't exist, right? It's sort of the same thing with life. And weirdly, I think, again, it's a little bit dramatic, but I think with romance, if you're not willing to die for it, then it's not romance, right? And then all these things all can kind of intermingle. That's my view, anyway. I think that there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, okay.
I hope that makes some sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Poppy, what is this romance that Sheehan's talking about? Where's it gone? Because I don't sense that there is much of that I would die for you kind of feeling.
It's a total
on these
fiction
apps.
and absurdity.
It's a fiction.
My God. You said at the beginning you were very quick to head off at the pass, this thing about being an inheritor of courtly love. But the way you're talking about romance is as if your lover's in a window and you're in a perfectly manicured garden with a conical hat on. You're a total heir of the troubadour, which is beautiful in a way. But I think every generation, and this goes back to like those softly lit 90s films with like Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, like You've Got Mail, all this stuff. That generation, that was all about how romance was mediated through email, right? Every generation loves to think that you're at the coalface of a dying romantic era. But as I said, all that stuff, this inconvenience being an important part of being in love, having to die for it, all those noble qualities, that, in the grand scheme of how normal people live their lives, sometimes you just really like someone. And I think that actually this sort of ubisant thing of, what has been, we're destroying the nobility of this burnished romance and all this stuff. I think it's just kind of, that seems more destructive and more of an obstruction to people actually having a normal, healthy relationship. Wanting that sort of all the obstacles and the difficulty, that seems more of a problem than the fact that you're meeting them on Hinge.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Go for it.
First of all, I know because it's a group. I agree with you, by the way. The first thing you learn when you open a history book is, to my mind, is that everyone throughout all of history has been saying exactly the same thing over and over again, which is just that things weren't as good as they used to be. That's all anybody ever says. So, and it's true of romance as well. But that being said, right, again, sorry to emphasise this point, but the event is about romance. You said, what if you just like someone? We're not talking about healthy relationships. And that romance, if it means anything, surely does not mean
if
the
it's
same
not
thing.
toxic, you don't want it. Is that it?
Well, no, I don't know. I'm just saying, the word, we have this word romance clearly is a bit of a weird word, because we don't, by it, we don't just mean sort of a stable marriage. We don't just mean a relationship that is, successful according to, all these guidelines laid out by, somebody like Jordan Peterson or whatever. And equally, we don't just mean dating and hookups. When we say romance, there is this sort of there's something to it when we use a word, right? And I said this earlier, it's not necessarily a good thing, but maybe I'm focusing too much on that particular word. But I think it is interesting that this because the point is we love films about it and we love books about it, don't we?
People are still crazy about love.
But I think it's okay to
Yeah,
love
of course it
romance
is.
films.
Of course it is. But I don't think that is any less than it used to be.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You know, we've all been in
But I feel like
whirlwind relationships.
I feel like now the biggest worry is like young people have unrealistic expectations. They'll just like watch too many rom-coms and they'll think that there's this
so they're falling
old-fashioned
into
love.
that trap, don't you think? So
No.
that is the problem. So how would it work the other way around?
I don't think the problem is unrealistic expectations. I think the problem is low expectations. It's like, oh, you know, I can't ask for monogamy. You know, we're in a talking phase. I can't ask that they're not
That's
like
true.
talking
That's
to three
true.
other people at the same time. I can't expect someone to give me romance. I can't expect this. And it's like,
Yeah, because everyone's got their boundaries.
yeah.
Right?
Whereas I do believe romance is real, and I do think that people in the past knew how to do it better than we do. I think we overthink it now and we over-optimize it. But I think this idea that it's just like it's unrealistic and our generation are just nostalgic, it's like, no, I think it has died and we've forgotten how to do it.
You think romance is dead?
I do.
Well,
It's on life support.
wait, but here's it. What do we think romance is? What would be a romance? Like, you know, there are all these like just crappy stereotypes. Like,
Well, you're quibbling over the definition because
No,
you
no.
think it's
Sure.
something crazy and fraught, whereas I think
yeah.
I have
Sure.
taken it to just be romantic love.
Are we pathologizing modesty here? Are we getting to the point where we're saying you're not just, you know, romantic, you've got low expectations or you've got low self-esteem? Are we saying that a modest romance is not a proper romance?
Yeah.
Because that seems to be adjacent to this optimization culture, that to allow someone modesty and, you know, would require admitting that romance might come on a kind of spectrum that won't always be the grand courtly love and might actually be a marriage of 50 years or, Freya, you said your grandparents are here.
Yeah,
Who-
62 years.
62 years.
Over there.
Shout out, Freya's grandparents. Proving it's not dead. So the kind of natural inbuilt modesty of a long relationship as opposed to a fiery fling feels like it needs to have its place here in this conversation because we're stuck between these two poles. Yes, people are scared of asking for monogamy, but they are also scared of admitting that they desire a kind of modest style of living.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. It's like now if you want real romance, if you want a lasting relationship like my grandparents have, you're like needy and insecure. Like if you're someone that says, actually, I would prefer when we start talking, you just talk to me, or, you know, I'm in this for marriage, you're now really forward and everyone has to play it cool and kind of like shove down their feelings and their want for romance. And I think actually to save romance and keep it going, people have to just be completely vulnerable and not in this like therapy speak way, which is like, these are my boundaries and, you know, but just more like, I feel this way, like, is this as painful as it is for you, as it is for me? Is this as scary as it is for you? And yeah, I am needy. I have a human need for love, and I'm not ashamed of that.
There's a political element to this as well. I wonder if any of you have faced this. If you are a young person who's demanding of a kind of more, let's say, old-fashioned style of romance, whether that's just monogamy or even something more traditional like marriage, then you are labelled as a conservative or even more as potentially as right-wing for wanting those things.
That's crazy.
So yeah, tell me about it. Has that happened to you?
So I think there is a good analogue within this about sex itself, about non-conventional setups. You know, oh, by the way, are we just seeing each other? Because actually, you know, my last girlfriend was cool with me, just like seeing loads of other people and like all that stuff. You know, there's a good analogue here with sex, and you know, I'm sure we're going to talk about pornography in a bit. God, I hope so.
We can. Well, this is a good time because the OnlyFans generation, OnlyFans, that'd be way better. That's my colour. The evening steers towards dinner. OnlyFans generation and the 1,000 Men Bonnie Blue challenge are all, you know, elements of the culture that says that sex is not a necessary kind of connector to romance, that romance and sex are two completely different things.
Yeah, see, this is where the sort of feminist argument comes in. I think that the incel take on this is that women are winning with the dating app setup because they have their pick of very sort of, they want the top 10% of men, 90% of women want
The
that.
6 foot and over filter.
Yeah, well, you have to pay for that, so, guys, sorry.
I didn't know.
Do you do that manually in these parts? No, so yeah, the pornography thing is important because as I think that actually this casualized dating culture, and this is something that Louise Perry has written very convincingly about, I think that it has let women down more because women are more likely to be pressurized into non-conventional romantic configurations, so like non-monogamy, which I think that men are more, they're more keen on in early relationships for various reasons. And in terms of sex, I think that women are so often pressured into frankly bizarre things that is to do with the hyper-stimulating arms race of porn, basically. And yeah, I think that's a huge problem. If you're talking about the polarization of men and women on dating apps, it's because, and this is according to, a lot of my peers have told me this, and, one of my peers, maybe being myself, maybe,
asking for a friend.
I don't know, maybe. It's that, it's just getting really weird out there in a way that it really wasn't before, that it's a real race to the bottom. And again, like you said about women being accused of being conservative, or I think the word that's mostly used is intolerant, illiberal, or prudish, is that you're not willing to meet some really hyper-specific sexual fantasy with a guy that you know, like, for what, 4 hours? I mean, come on, guys. That's not...
As you said, it's an arms race. If everyone's sexualising themselves, then humility just becomes invisibility. And you have to sexualise yourself in order to get the attention of your crush, who's now inundated with constant Instagram influencers and infinite porn stars all the time. So I think Bonnie Blue is not going to... The problem is not Bonnie Blue is going to influence people, is that she's the inevitable product of growing up on a platform like Instagram.
So she's actually more of a case study than she is a kind of bad example.
Well, I think now older generations are like, why doesn't this generation see sex as a sacred thing? Why don't they see themselves as more sacred and worth more? And it's like, well, we've been displaying ourselves like products since we were like 10. And I think that is the real problem. And I think that's a huge, again, it goes back to the start of the conversation. It's like, we view ourselves like objects, we view other people like products. And I really think that is different to previous generations. And I think that's a total hindrance to proper romance and love, because you're just kind of
What
shopping.
about what she's done to the way men see women?
Yeah, but I think that, well, it all just feeds each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's also an interesting thing, isn't it? Like, we've internalised that thing about seeing each other as products, seeing ourselves as products. But then, men... I mean, those videos are just harrowing. Like going through the corridors and loads of men in face masks.
I think some of it might also be slightly preemptive as well. Women might come into a romantic situation with a preemptive feeling about what that man expects from them. So it's not simply a kind of one-to-one.
Yeah, because it's that John Berger thing. Women see themselves being seen, right?
So it's how you're seen will matter to how you...
Yeah, so it's all encouraging this object-subject dynamic, which is really... I mean, it's not, again, like we talk about, I mean, that is a toxic relationship. It's one where, I think we've all had it, where you find yourself in a heterosexual dynamic settling into that object-subject thing of, I've got to look like this, sound like this. And you're like, am I playing into the videos that I suspect my boyfriend has seen? And you are.
Are there, before we kind of close this part and take a little break and then come back and do some questions from you guys, hopefully, and also some more conversation, are there ways of re-enchanting romance, to use a phrase used by Louise Perry very often? The re-enchantment, could that happen without a complete destruction of OnlyFans, a taking down of all of the dating apps, a re-education, forced re-education of all men in their romantic ideals,
and internment camps,
romantic internment camps?
I don't know. I guess I'm skeptical. Again, I can't really speak for my generation. I'm sort of, to some extent, chronically offline, to be honest. But
despite having one of the most read Twitter accounts in this country, but I mean,
how do you manage it? God.
but I do.
She literally has millions of Twitter followers.
but I will say, I'm convinced. I think pornography is a miserable thing. I think it's worse for you than smoking. The many of it.
It's definitely worse for you than smoking.
It's absolutely. I don't know. I see a lot of my friends, and I
Wait,
wish
you
I
see
could,
a lot of your friends watch pornography?
well, they talk about it all the time. They just can't talk about anything else.
they?
And yeah.
God, I didn't know men actually spoke to each other, but I thought they were all embarrassed about it.
No, they're not
Well,
embarrassed about it, and it sort of concerns me. And look, maybe I'm going to sound ridiculous here, but I think there is such a thing as like, you know, what you read and what you're exposed to obviously makes a difference. And maybe just because I happened to, you know, I love books, and when I was a teenager, I worked in a bookshop, and I was always picking out old volumes of poetry, and I was reading Rupert Brooke, and then I'm reading Tasso and Ariosto and this kind of crap when I'm 16. That does make you think a certain way, for good or for bad. I'm not saying I'm in the right here. I'm just telling you my experience, and I think that gave me, for like the certain romantic education. Maybe I am idealistic, but my life seems to be going very well. I'm certainly very happy, and I've had some you know.
So
rapturous experiences.
Re-education of young people with love poetry?
Well, that sounds a little bit sort of curmudgeonly maybe, but this bloody exciting stuff, poetry, love poetry is wow. You know, it's far better than pornography.
What are you talking about? These are not equivalent things. Come on.
Okay, but on the point about, I don't know, like so here's something interesting. I don't know if this is interesting. Maybe please tell me if it isn't, but not so long ago, I think there was like, because romance can be small acts as well, and my friend, I spoke about this with my friend literally 2 nights ago. I was talking about tonight's event, and we were saying, you know, what is romance, and what he said to me, he uses dating apps, he goes on dates all the time, he wants to find the one, and my girlfriend was coming back from abroad, and I went to pick her up from Heathrow Airport, and I can't drive, so I just got the tube, and I just went to the airport and was there when she got back. And he was shocked. He was like, "What? I would never have thought of going to like go and get somebody from the airport." And to me, that was like that's the minimum. That's the least I could do. I didn't even have a bloody car. You know, I was just like, "Hello," and then I'll carry your bags for you, sort of thing. But so that interested me that he didn't seem to. That to me, that was an obvious thing. That maybe it's because of my parents or whatever, my family that they instilled that. I mean, I don't know. But that when I talk about maybe romantic education, that's like a small act of service and love, which seems obvious to me, and maybe it's obvious to, I don't know what you two think about that, but say my friend, he was really shocked by that little thing I'd done.
Well, maybe if you're watching Instagrammers, you know, buying each other Bugattis or taking each other on 2-week yacht holidays, then a meeting at Heathrow Airport to go back on the Elizabeth line, you know, pales in comparison.
Piccadilly.
And or the Piccadilly line, in fact.
If you had a Bugatti, they could drive you home. So
maybe it's the comparative nature.
But sorry, on that point though, yes, but that's not as romantic, right?
No,
that's
yeah, and I agree. There's
enough,
a financial aspect to it which I despise, about women insisting on men paying for dates. I despise that. But I think those, these are love languages, aren't they? What's your love language?
Okay,
There's another acts of service. That rolled off your tongue very interestingly.
I don't know if I buy that.
You don't believe in the love language.
But this is the whole problem, right? We're optimizing. We've got formulas. We've got this like horribly analytic mindset.
Yeah, like what is your love language? It's gift giving. Okay, you get gifts and nothing else.
It's just all the bloody.
I think it's just your friend sounds like a mean bastard. He doesn't want to pick his girlfriend up on the airport.
He's kind, he's sweet, he's lovely. But sorry, the love languages point. Sorry, it is interesting to me because I think we're obsessed. We've got this analytic mindset, almost like medieval scholastic philosophers, you know, where they've got to categorise proposition 1A, B, all the like. That is not how we are. I don't think it's how we are as people. You have like this obsession with formulas and models and so principles and all this evolutionary psychology stuff. It's just not romantic, and it really reduces us to these mechanical beings. So the love languages thing, which I have heard about, I sort of instinctively was repulsed by it because I thought, because as soon as you're thinking in terms of that, then you're
you're trying to hack your partner. That's what I don't like about it.
Exactly.
Is that you're trying to psychologize them.
Yeah.
And that's another element of this, is the psychoanalytic culture that we're in which there are so many self-help books and in fact influencers, many of which we meet here, whose whole worldview is completely led by a kind of idea of reading, analysing.
Formulaic, right? It's, okay. So you're saying A plus B equals.
Well, it's like
whatever.
types. You know, it's the idea of creating a set of types, and then you can absolutely hack your social interactions.
But it's like hacking the other person, but also that desire to define yourself as I do, physical touch. I'm someone who, you know, words of affirmation. Yeah, I know more, guys. Yeah, whatever. And it's like that ties in with self-help culture, because it's not just about hacking other people. It's about the desire to gather yourself around other strange people on the internet as fitting around these, which people can't be divided into types like that. It's totally artificial.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we'll probably talk in the second part about, you know, incels and other groups, tradwives who've found their kind of communities online as well, and fit into these kind of romantic categories. Freya, I'll give you the last word before we stop. We'll stop for 10 minutes for a drink from the bar, and then we'll come back and do some questions and some more. Is there any hope of re-enchantment, or is that a kind of complete fantasy at the moment we're in?
I think there is, and I think I was thinking as you were talking that there's the psychologist Eric Fromm who talks about two different states, which is you can be in a state of having and a state of being. And I feel like now, as I said, we're shopping for partners. It's like now the kind of thinking is I want to have a boyfriend. It's not I want to be a girlfriend, or I want to have a husband. Not I want to be a husband. And I feel like the problem is now we want to kind of collect people and shop for people, rather than thinking about like, I want to take her to the airport. I want to be the kind of person that takes my partner to the airport. And I think the problem is young people now think they need to find the perfect partner, so they need to optimize and go on these apps, and then one scroll away is the perfect person. And they need to search for all these red flags, and it's like we're all walking red flags.
Yeah.
Like
everyone's so paranoid about that as well.
Yeah, and you could just decide.
The idea of the deal breaker, that kind of thing.
But I think really it comes down to if you conduct yourself with someone who believes that romance is real, and you try your hardest to be the person you want to be, then you will attract people who are like that. And I think it's about, you know, like holding yourself to high expectations as well as other people. And I think if you find romance now in the modern world amid all of this like chaos and porn and dating apps and everything, then it's even more special. And yeah, it should be treasured if you find it.
Do you agree that the root cause of situationships is generally women punching above their weight, going after a guy who's more successful than them or attractive than them, who's kind of messing them around?
No, this is an obsession with leagues and bands and everyone punching above. This is so neurotic. Like,
Can you describe what a situationship is first?
Okay, so a situationship is where you're with someone, you're dating them, but neither of you will commit, or maybe generally one of you is kind of being held hostage. It's like, well, I don't want to put labels on it. It's interesting that you saw that though, like that very much sounds like it's from the deep dark, like incel corner. Yeah, what's going on? That's a cause for self-reflection, I think. But
yeah, you've got to fix that algorithm.
Yeah, leagues don't exist. Like that, it's a crazy thing that, again, like we were talking about people being sorted into attachment styles. It's this thing of being in different percentiles of attractiveness, which is completely subjective. And actually, if everyone was just a bit more normal and touched some grass, then maybe everyone would be having a bit more sex. So,
Sheehan, Freya, anything on the situationship discourse?
I think the situationship is just the result of having no like guardrails or expectations for relationships now. Like if you're, this is why I think young women, you've seen like tradwives and people becoming more conservative or getting called conservative. It's like they're the only spaces where there's actual guardrails and expectations, where you can say, actually, I'm waiting till marriage, and actually, this is my right and wrong. Whereas if you're like just in the liberal culture and you're dating, you just set your boundaries and kind of hope for the best. And you kind of, each person you meet, you have to find out their version of morality, and like whether they do a talking stage, whether they sleep with other people when you're talking. And it's like, that's just chaos, and I think situationship is just the inevitable result of that.
Have you ever been in a situationship?
When I was younger, but not recently.
Have you ever dated above your league, as far as you would say it? Is that your boyfriend?
No.
Let me be the judge.
This is the arranged marriage night now.
I think when I was younger, maybe, yeah. I'd say so.
Do you think sometimes, though, perhaps that kind of mismatch is more about the expectation? I fear with some men that they think that women want them to be more relaxed. And so, in fact, there's a kind of weird double thing going, like a double bluff going on, where they are faking a kind of I don't want to put labels on it attitude that they believe women are looking for, kind of fifth wave feminists are looking for.
But you're both meant to pretend to be completely chill at the start, aren't you? Oh, I don't care. You know, if it works out, I don't care, and you go home, like, write their name 5 times, put it under your pit,
but
you know, or something.
No literature about love has ever given that impression. Like, every single love story is someone being struck dumb on first sight.
Yeah,
and
but
then...
that's not the performance. In real dating, you have to be nonchalant. And people being forward, I think actually because we're in a culture where cringe is dead, like, you can't be cringe, it's the last thing you can be.
If you can't look someone in the eyes and just, like, say this thing to them, which would sound cringe if I tweeted it. Well, okay. Well, look, I just...
Well, say it now and see if we cringe.
Okay, now, look, I just saw this on the shelf, a copy of Shakespeare, so complete works. Act 2, Scene 2 of Romeo and Juliet. Again, no. This is precisely why I chose that. I hope this will come up, just because Juliet says this, like, extraordinary thing. So Romeo says, okay, I realise this is a bit ridiculous, but please just bear with me. So the famous balcony scene, Romeo says, oh, will thou leave me so unsatisfied? Juliet, what satisfaction canst thou have tonight? Romeo, the exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine. Juliet, I gave thee mine before thou didst request it, and yet I would it were to give again. Wouldst thou withdraw it? For what purpose, love? Juliet says, but to be frank, and give it thee again. And yet I wish but for the thing I have. My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. Right? Okay.
So you would save romance by ventriloquising a 14-year-old girl in a play? Yes?
I think that's a pretty silly take on that. My point. No, I mean, that's childish. Like, what Juliet says there, right? Like, I don't know about all of you, but I think that's one of the most profound, such a precise, astonishingly precise description of what it means to feel that kind of love. Like, it's one of the hardest things to say. Shakespeare, obviously the greatest there ever was, manages to say it, but are we able to look someone in the eyes and say that, you know?
How would you feel if a girl said that to you, a woman, said that to you in the early stage of dating? Like, surely you got to get to a point.
Well, why not?
Well,
it's sooner rather than later. I mean, please.
How soon?
I don't know. Pretty soon.
How soon before you bust out the Shakespeare? That's what I want to know.
Well, it doesn't take me very long. But, I think it is this culture of irony and of bathos, or bathos to use the word. You know, every profound point has to be followed by pulling the rug out from under it and making it a joke. You see it, the most famous example, I guess, in modern culture is like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All these superhero films, they can't say anything without having, some sort of sly nod or the breaking the fourth wall. You just can't compare it. Only 20 years ago, look at the Spider-Man films with Tobey Maguire. They're pretty sincere films. They were like the early 2000s. In the intervening 20 years, when the internet has really conquered our lives, just baffles us, just completely, just put a wrecking ball through our ability to be profound. That's my take. But I don't know if these two have a different point. But
I think the problem for me is like therapy culture, the therapizing of language. It's like Juliet would probably be called like anxiously attached or like codependent now, because now it's like now it's like you have a problem. We kind of glamorize independence so much, and then dependence becomes like a pathology that you now punish yourself for, like, oh, why do I like this person so much?
Juliet's given me the ick because she's so needy.
Yeah, or like maybe I like this person so much because of my childhood trauma, and like now I'm trying to attach to someone.
Juliet's daddy issues have led to...
Well, Romeo's the fuckboy. He was with Rosalind like the week before.
Okay, we're going to take another question before we get into the Romeo and Juliet fandom discourse. Let's come down here. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Sowerby, do you believe or do you recognise transcendence?
God, what on earth do you mean by that?
Something which transcends the human condition.
In this case,
obviously in a romantic context.
Yeah, transcendent romantic love exists. Of course it does.
Good, thank you.
No. I want to ask you a follow-up. Why did you ask me that? Do you think I'm a dyed-in-the-wool cynic? You think it's uncooked?
Dyed in the wool, but possibly nylon.
Nylon! Thank you very much. Game recognises game, thank you.
To some extent here about romance and the L word, love.
Yeah.
You come across perhaps a little bit as being averse to that side of things.
No, not at all.
Mathematics and the spreadsheets can ever actually produce the transcendent.
Oh, of course, yeah, they can, because as I said at the beginning, I think that dating apps, all that, all the algorithmic stuff going on, that's just to get you in the room, and the rest is up to chemistry, isn't it? And of course it can happen, and you're very lucky if it can.
I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the concept of risk and safetyism, because I'm really curious about what you think the ramifications are of this generation really being very risk averse. And at the same time, we've sort of taught this whole generation that if they're not happy, there's something wrong. And I think that's something about romance, which is it's painful. There's something beautiful, but also something very painful about it. And we've sort of told them that pain is something to be avoided. Can you talk a little more about that?
I actually have two quick questions. One, I was also very cynical about young people's ability to have romance because of this whole thing about everyone being cringe. Everybody's really worried about being cringe or seeming overly keen. But then I was quite intrigued by the concept of Riz. As in people really liking Riz. And I presume Riz is short for charisma, right? And suddenly a lot of people are talking about it and they're like, oh, they've got Riz. And I'm thinking, okay, well actually, maybe this indicates that people are open to slightly more eccentric, charismatic characters, and actually we're a bit post-cringe now, and anyway, I don't know, I'm just curious if anyone could reflect on Riz. Two, I think we all agree that part of romance is spontaneity, right? And it's people boldly reciting poetry or whatever. But obviously that's quite bold, and that involves people having the confidence to approach someone and make a bold gesture like that. And I'm just wondering, in an age where we're so worried about consent, post Me Too, people are really scared about crossing boundaries and doing something that's going to be perceived as a violation of personal space. Or, I want to hear from a man on this one. Do men feel like, because I'm sure as a man, you must see a strikingly beautiful woman on the tube or in a bar, and you must have the urge, you're a man, obviously you have
it's incredibly unhappy.
Surely something stops you, and is it the fear of being perceived as being creepy or crossing a line?
I can't speak for my fellow men. I don't think I'm someone who's inclined to just see a beautiful woman and just I don't know. That's not how I live or ever have. I think that's the thing. There are better ways to begin with talking to someone than that. It's just a bit. Again, it's a bit boring, really, I guess. There's so many exciting things can happen in a day, and how you might run into somebody and meet somebody and things to talk about. I'm just not really well placed to answer the question, to be honest. Although,
Give it a go.
What?
Give it a go. Come on.
What do you think? But
I'm sort of. Would I be worried about doing something inappropriate by talking to someone? Maybe, but I don't think in a political sense. I mean, maybe just the way I was raised. I just wouldn't want to sort of hurt somebody's feelings or be impolite, to be honest with you. And that's about the extent of my thoughts on that matter. I just want to be impolite to somebody. I don't want to. So somebody looks like they've got earphones in and that they're working. I probably wouldn't go and just say I don't even know what the hell these people say. This whole Riz stuff.
Cold approach.
The cold approach you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
The pick-up artistry and then hitting on people. It's kind of grotesque. It just sounds miserable.
Is Riz the same as pick-up artistry? Is that adjacent?
Riz is itself a joke. It's not.
Yeah, sure.
That's
It seems pretty ironic.
The question from the audience, I'm afraid that is another joke. Gen Z just cannot embrace earnestness. So yeah, when you say someone has good Riz, it's probably not meant. Sorry to let you down. But I'm interested actually, and there were a few yelps of accord from the audience.
They seem far more keen than I did.
You in particular said that you felt like you were worried about seeming like a creep when you approach women. And I would say it's not creepy to approach women, it's how you do it, isn't it? Just, be normal.
It's exactly how you do it, exactly.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like basic table manners,
Exactly, behaving normally in society. I wonder, can I do that? Can we rebound?
We can rebound.
Can you speak about that?
So I'm 34 and childless and single, and I was recently talking to a male friend of mine who's 35 and childless and single, and we're both unhappy about that state of affairs. And my friend who's older than 35, he said he recently worked out that when his dad was his age, his dad had 3 kids and a wife, and he's still married. And I said, is it the case that were our dads just working harder than we are? Or is it that just the whole thing is more difficult now?
I mean, that's a meme.
Like,
do you know that meme? Of like my
I'm not a Gen
parents
Z.
at 30.
I might be too old to know that meme.
No, but it's like my parents at 30, and it's like we have and it's like I do colouring in.
Because I mean, I think that what's happened is that the whole exercise is just so much more complicated, and it's partly because of what Freya was saying, that now people there are so many kind of moral codes existing in the same society, you know, that so you have to be a lot more careful. And now it's kind of some people think marriage is perhaps right wing and therefore bad, or, you know, against children and that kind of thing. And it's just and like the infinite choice you have on dating sites just means that people are kind of, just as I said, the whole process is so much more complicated than if dating sites didn't exist.
Freya, this is your kind of area of expertise, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's way harder now. There are just more obstacles. Like my nan and granddad just met, fell in love, and have been loyal to each other ever since. And it's just simple. And I think we overthink it now with the therapy culture and with the optimization and everything. But I think a big problem with it as well is just social anxiety, especially for our generation. I think like there is the Me Too stuff, and that does play into it, of like being a creep. You know, I'm sure some men are afraid to seem like a creep, but I think the bigger problem is like we're all just terrified to talk to each other, and we're all just terrified to be vulnerable because we're on screen so much and we're simulating so much of this. Like especially people our age, it's like a lot of people who are from Gen Z were watching like violent online porn before they'd even had a first kiss, before they'd even tried to have a relationship. You know, instead of dating, approaching someone in person, their first experience is a dating app. Or instead of flirting in person, it's just like sliding into a DM on Instagram, or like sending a flame emoji on Snapchat. And it's like, if you do that, then your experience of falling in love in relationships, it's like you can rehearse it perfectly, you can craft the perfect DM. And then when it comes to real life, it's like live, and it's kind of terrifying. And then you add to that the therapy culture, no one being sincere, and it's like, I think, as you said before, it's like both sides are holding back. Everyone's pretending to be kind of like emotionally detached and unfazed and uncaring, whereas really I think a lot of it is real anxiety and like fear of human connection, which is where the risk aversion comes from, because human connection comes with risk. That is what it is. But we all seem to be scared of that now.
There's also the perception and reality that the window for having children has grown.
Yeah.
So perhaps when your grandparents met, that window would have been smaller, and actually also the cost of living would have been such that 2 people didn't have to work full time to survive. So someone could say, I'm going to work less or even not at all, and we can have this family. And also the expectation is that if you have less time to have children, you need to get on with it and do it. Now people you are meeting who are in their late 30s, even early 40s, may think I've got plenty of time because of technological developments, but also because of the just sheer need to make money.
This doesn't feel like a sort of, you don't seem very relaxed about this situation. You seem quite unhappy with your lot. And I agree, this is something that a lot of our generation and up to elder millennials have to deal with, this kind of solitude. I wonder, I'm curious, I hope it's not too personal, but I wonder who you chiefly blame for the way that things are. And I agree, it's incredibly difficult to meet people in these situations. Do you think it's because women's standards are too high? Do you think it's because algorithms are designed to keep us dissatisfied? Who do you blame for this?
I don't think it's women's standards are too high. I think it's more like last year I read both the Case Against the Sexual Revolution and also the Abolition of Britain by Pete Hitchens, which everyone should read if they haven't. And it's basically just that, like, we just abolished morality and abolished Christianity, and we thought that everything would be fine. And so now we're just a society that proudly believes in nothing. I don't think that's not really sustainable.
So the kind of death of romance, to use the phrase we've used in the title, is in some way downstream of a kind of existential Western crisis. There obviously is, because those birth rate figures that I spoke about at the beginning are not true of all countries across the world.
Yeah.
This is not a shared crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Like in
specific
the
to
Far East, they're plummeting. That's not to do with the death of Christianity. I think what the sort of question within a question here, the subtext that we really should be inching towards is, you're talking about a post-Christian society. A Christian society is one in which it's harder for women to get divorced. It's more imperative that they get married in the first place. Is that the society we want?
Well, also, marriage and romance, of course, are two different things. Not to become Sheehan at the beginning,
but being coupled, full stop.
But there is a difference there. A forced marriage, no one would say, is full of romance.
But a higher societal imperative to be in a couple, I don't know if that. For example, what are the policy solutions? I mean, not putting this on you, that's unfair. Like, what can we do about this?
Yeah, well, what can we do? I mean, do you have are there any thoughts here on what would be a kind of, pro-natalist or pro-romance policy?
It's possible with some things. So like children, 11-year-olds being on Instagram can be a policy issue. But I think what you said about the death of Christianity is really it. It's like all of these things we've been talking about, like situationships and the loss of sincerity and everyone's being ironic and no one's kind of saying what right and wrong is. That is the death of Christianity because Christianity took those things seriously. And it did say... People don't believe. What can you do? Replace it with a social contract, with the sense of morality. That's gone. What do we do? I think the answer is just not to... it's not to legislate it, but it's not to throw it away. My grandparents are not explicitly religious, but they live a Christian lifestyle. They live by those values because those values work. And that is actually the worldview that says to you, yeah, there's a right and wrong, there's a way of doing things, and it did work to give people guidance. This is why we're all online, listening to TikTok trauma-informed therapists and Instagram influencers, because we have no other way of knowing what right and wrong is, so we have to go to these experts online, whereas before it was just the culture. There was a sense of it. And if you're... But then let's get down to the nitty-gritty of that. In a Christian framework, we are dealing with specific policy things like divorce being harder to get. That's what we're losing. It's not just a cultural consensus, it's also to do with policy. And my contention is, this is unintended consequences of feminism, blah, blah, blah. But would we want to live in that world still? I suggest no. I mean, that'd be awful. But do you think divorce should be as easy as possible? I think it should be precisely as easy as it is now. No-fault divorces was a fairly recent innovation. I don't think the answer is... Because it's always going to be women who bear the brunt of being forced to stay into unsatisfactory couplings, and I think that it's always women who bear the brunt. And that's but I think children bear the brunt of it now. Through divorce? Yeah, which is now that not only do nearly half... Stay together for the kids? Does that work? 100%. I think really? Nearly half of children in the UK are now living without both their mother and father before age 14. Despise each other. I mean, that's terrible, isn't it? It's terrible. That's not a healthy family unit. Well, there's obviously extreme cases where parents despise each other and there's abuse, but I think, again, it goes back to having and being. I think my grandparents' generation, it was more about being. It was being a mother and being a wife. And sometimes there is dissatisfaction that can be overcome for the good of the children. I think at the moment we've veered the complete other way. Where not only do we have family breakdown, but now, again, we can't talk about it because if you're a child and your parents divorce, everyone says to you, well, that happens to half of marriages. You can't really complain about it. But I think, it's a trauma for young children. There's a whole therapy industry that profits off people complaining about precisely that. And I think, I don't know, I don't think people should have to stay in miserable marriages just because there's some, and what you're talking about is duty. And there's a whole set of things that people do in the name of marital duty, not least, duty sex, putting up with your in-laws. But is duty an element of romance? I think from your story about the picking up at the airport. Yeah, but that's because you have an undying desire to do that because you're passionately in limerence with them. Mm-hmm. It's not because you kind of, you've been with someone for 30 years and you don't really like them and you don't really fancy them.
But I think it can translate.
Marriage and romance can overlap, but they are different things.
I agree. I completely agree. I think, which is why I've been sort of quibbling over here. But they can overlap. I think you can. I like to believe you can. Again, I'm being very realistic, but I don't see why romance can't also be a way of life as well. But yeah, for sure, it's a different thing when you get into the whole bloody marriage stuff. It's like
I just worry we're speaking too conceptually, and I wonder. Is there a policy answer to this?
Yeah, well, I think there is.
Or a cultural imperative.
Okay, Sheehan, give us your policy.
Everyone quote.
It's like rebuilding the Barbican, but with like lovely florid towels.
I'm actually. I love brutalism.
You love brutalism?
That shocks me. That totally shocks me.
I think it's the greatest architectural movement of the.
That's the real headline tonight.
Anyway,
you will lose half a million
No. Unfortunately, I don't have anything very insightful to say. Nothing insightful whatsoever, because it's obviously true that the internet is just catastrophically bad for everybody. It just isn't good for you. My career is made on the internet. I mean, I suppose all of us wouldn't be here without the internet. That's obviously true, but I don't think that means, I don't know, it just seems to be very simply the fact all these issues we've been talking about, we just now had a bit of a discussion about Christianity and so on and so forth, but largely speaking, the specifics of interactions on this, all this, it just comes down to the internet.
Yeah, but the horse is bolted. What do we do?
No, I don't. Has it bolted? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, no, we can't take Gen Z offline. There's no way.
Well, then they'll be condemned to forever suffer the consequences. But
right, as they should.
Yeah, but it happens, right? Sometimes the generation is just unlucky. If you're around in the
third. Yeah, but isn't that exactly what we're talking about?
Sure.
Every generation loves to think that they're beset by unprecedented problems.
Okay, but sure. But if you came of age in the late 1340s and the bubonic plague,
you probably died. Yeah, exactly. Die of plague. And if you got some syphilis.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not syphilis, but the Black Death. That's fairly sui generis. And I think the same thing with the Rise of Internet. Somebody had to get hit with this thing. Sorry, everybody. You're literally just going to be. You're going to find it hard. But they hopefully have the wisdom to say, actually, the next generation, you just cannot. I don't know. You just can't go online until you're. What, I don't know, 18, maybe, who knows? I don't know how far we'll go.
Jonathan
you can say how much you'll legislate.
He has absolutely got the right idea, I think, with this thing about, until your brain is kind of developed, 14, smartphones, that he wrote The Anxious Generation, hugely influential. I'm sure a lot of UnHerd readers know about it. That's a good policy point. That's a concrete thing that we can do. I mean, what do you think about that? Would that help? I think it would.
Yeah. I think I agree with you that every generation has different problems, but I feel like the romance thing is particularly our problem because it's again, it's the convenience thing. It's we have the world at our fingertips. The internet has made everything within our reach, but romantic love is now completely unreachable as a result of it. And it's my older generations would have had different struggles, but I feel like our struggle is particularly the loss of romance, love, and mystery as well.
Mystery, right? We're living in a panopticon.
Romance, love, mystery, and housing.
You don't need housing for
there
romance.
Are other issues. No, but this all feeds in. This all feeds in, right?
Okay, sure, it does. But on that point specifically, but I know what you mean. We're living this panopticon. And we're always online, and also everything's being normalised as well. The word mysteries, I think, quite a really interesting word there, because what the hell is mysterious now?
Cool. And also you could go back and look at somebody's entire work history, from photos of them when they were 12 years old, who you've only just met,
But there are still, the artifice does lend itself to mystery. If you get someone's Instagram on Hinge, you're going to go through their main feed, and then you're going to go through the tag photos. And that's when the mystery dies. That's when the mystery
dies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what I'm going to do, because we've come to time and I promise that I will always end at 8:30, is I'm going to get you to each say something that you think is romantic, but not teddy bears and roses and the rest, the kind of usual Valentine's Day. It might even be something that's not related to love or sex or anything like that. Something that Sheehan, you mentioned before that you could live a romantic life. That doesn't just mean your relationships to the opposite sex or the same sex, depending which way you bend, but actually every moment of the day can be romantic. Sure. Tell me something that you find romantic in your everyday life. Poppy, you go first.
Oh my God, it's got to be someone picking me up from Heathrow Airport on the tube. I would melt. Patty in your hand, guys.
Freya, for you.
I think it's probably speaking sincerely. I think that's so missing today. And I think a lot of people talk in therapy speak, and they kind of try and hide their vulnerability by speaking this way. And I think real romance is actually saying to someone how you actually feel, saying it up front, not clouding it and like, you know, maybe this is my attachment style speaking or anything like that, not setting your boundaries, but just sincerely being like, I want to be with you against all the odds and I'm all in, that kind of thing. And I actually think therapy culture has not helped us open up about things. I think it's actually closed down our language, because now we talk in terms of like boundaries and attachment styles. But
Sheehan, I'll give you the final word on that.
Sure. Okay, how about this one? And I, that on my familiar hill saw with uncomprehending eyes 1,000 of thy sunsets spill their fresh and sanguine sacrifice, ere the sun swings his noonday sword, must say goodbye to all of this, by all delights that I shall miss. Help me to die, O Lord. That was written by W.N. Hodgson, a war poet. He wrote that 2 days before he died in the trenches in 1916, I think. I don't know. I think if you're not willing to die for it, then it's not romance.
On that note, may we all go out and die tonight. Happy Valentine's Day!